Today's episode is brought to you by Lingoda, and welcome back to another video of Late Night Chats with yours truly. And today we're going to talk about a really strange phenomenon of time speeding up as you get older. So remember those times when you were kids? Everything seemed like an adventure, and especially time to you felt like an eternity, especially those few hours leading up to some adventure or something. And adventure at the time could be as simple as taking a train into the city alone. Could be as simple as sneaking out into the park in the middle of the night. Or one of my favorite adventures at the time when I was a young kid was simply going to the movies with friends. Honestly, we didn't really care about the movies that much because as a kid you just thought movies are movies. It's not like you have the sensibilities of a annoying 20-something film buff. And most importantly, it was the ritual of going to the movies that really excited us. There's something about lining up to get the tickets for the film, and there's something about meeting up after the film to talk about the movies over frozen yogurt that really cemented those periods of watching movies into unforgettable memories. But however, as I got older, now I'm not that old, but I'm getting to the age where time is kind of speeding up, movies, or at least going to the cinema, seem to drop down on my list of priorities. And what I realized eventually is that I seem to jam movies into gaps in my schedules, and I no longer remember as many movies as I've watched before. And as the ritual of going to the cinema disappeared, gradually all of the memories of seeing these films descended into countless films that I can't even remember nowadays. And when we zoom back out a little bit and kind of like look at our lives as kind of a movie, sometimes life seems to whiz past us a little too quickly. I mean, for example, the last 3 months went by in a flash, and now I'm halfway through my honors year, getting ready to write this huge thesis that I'm supposed to write. But in my mind, I still feel like I was only on campus yesterday, commencing my thesis workshop for the first time. And now we're almost getting to the time to celebrate Halloween. So a part of me is like, where did all that time go? And in this episode, we're going to talk about something based on some of my recent readings of this book called The Scent of Time, and to discuss why is it the case that we are starting to experience this acceleration of time as we get older. But more importantly, why is it the case that society as a whole seems to be experiencing this acceleration process? Why is it the case that we no longer carve out dedicated time and space to do something as simple as going to the movies with friends? But before we get to the meat of today's episode, I just want to spare a little moment to talk about today's video sponsor, Lingoda. Because in this video, we're going to be referencing a lot of movie watching and a lot of traveling, which both have something to do with this idea of temporality or how we experience time. One of the best ways for you to enrich both experiences, watching movies and going traveling abroad, is to pick up another language. And here's where Lingoda can really help you out. It is an online language learning school. No, it's not an app, but instead you'll be grouped into small classes with people ranging from 3 people to 5 people for you to gain a total immersion into your target language. Lingoda features classes for German and English from the A1 to C1 level, and also Spanish, French, and business English from A1 to B2 levels. So there are classes for everyone at different skill levels. If you're a bit of a busy person like me, writing a thesis on the one hand, and on the other hand, trying to carve out time to do what I enjoy, Lingoda features a very flexible scheduling system, so you can schedule your classes whenever you want with qualified teachers from all around the world. And as a special viewer of today's video, Lingoda is offering you guys a one-time offer for you to participate in their October Sprint Challenge. There are 2 modes of this Sprint Challenge. You can either take 15 classes in a span of 30 days or 30 classes consecutively in these 30 days, and both modes of sprint challenges will give you 50% cash back. Remember, this is a one-time offer only, and it is going to give you that true immersion into your target language, so don't miss out on this opportunity. And if you're ready to embark upon your language learning journey to watch more films in your target language, or if you're ready to travel abroad, be sure to head over to this video's description down below to access the link, and there's going to be a code there which gives you $25 off of your cash deposit for your sprint challenge. And then again, thank you Lingoda for sponsoring today's episode, and right now let's move on to this discussion of why is time moving faster the older we get. Now, to get straight to the point, the philosopher that we've discussed in the last episode, discussing why are we all so burnt out in this hustle culture, Byung-Chul actually argued in his book, The Scent of Time, that the modern or the late modern crisis that we're facing right now, it's actually a temporal crisis. Now, temporal is a very pretentious way of saying in relation to time. So anytime when I say temporal, just remember it has something to do with time. The tricky thing with temporality is that most people seem to take their conception of time for granted. When they're trying to do new things in their lives or when they try to organize their time, there's always a fixed conception of how time is, but as philosophically minded people, we're very good at questioning fixed assumptions about life. Now it seems to be the case that most people want to jam as much as possible into however little time that they have during the day. And it also seems to be the case that we've equated being busy with living a fulfilling life. And the base assumption here is that whoever lives twice as fast can enjoy twice as many life possibilities. A crammed schedule is sometimes always better than an empty one, and sometimes a weekend full of social engagements could seem a lot more fulfilling than staying in your house for that weekend. But as a consequence, we don't really experience the lead up to an event. There's no longer a period of waiting, and we no longer experience those nervous few days before you go on a first date with a person, and we no longer experience those excited few hours before you see your friends over the weekend again. There's really nothing to look forward to anymore because we've effectively eliminated all the gaps in our schedule where we could do that looking forward to. And without intervals, there's only an unstructured, directionless, side-by-side of confusion of events. And Byung-Chul pointed out that the real problem today is the fact that life has lost the possibility of reaching a meaningful conclusion. It is this fact that leads to the hectic rush and nervousness which characterized contemporary life. End quote. Have you ever noticed that there aren't a lot of conclusions to modern life? One event seems to bleed into another event without a lot of interval gaps. Meet up with one person, immediately you start to conjure up the next person to meet up with, and when you finish one piece of assignment, immediately you're thinking about the next assignment that's upcoming. And it also bleeds into how we consume information and entertainment. Before you watch an episode of something on Netflix, the next episode is ready to roll without you even having to wait for a whole week for this episode to air. Sometimes instead of reading a book cover to cover, we're so quick to jump on to the next hottest book to read on a bestsellers list. So in a sense, we end up never really turning any activity into an experience with gravity because nothing has a really definitive conclusion to it anymore. No ritual has an end no more. So now we're just kind of darting around in this confusion or in this hectic rush of different things that are coming in our way. And as a consequence, things are only encountered fleetingly with no depth. And now let's take this idea a step further and talk about traveling for a little bit. Because a few months ago, I was in fact not in Melbourne, Australia, but I was traveling to Paris with my partner. And what was really interesting is that both of us had different ways of remembering the experience. Both of us had different ways of documenting the experience. My partner's a very visual person, so she took a lot of photographs during the trip and she took a lot of memorabilia from little flea markets with her. And on the plane back, she was very busy color correcting all these photos and then trying to organize all the little trinkets in her suitcase. So that was her way of remembering the trip. But for me personally, I documented a lot of my experience through writing stories about them or writing these essays with little clips or little vignettes of my travels to Paris. At least for me, telling a narrative about this trip is a really great way for me to remember it. And as a result, both of us could really remember this trip quite distinctly because we had those devices or we had those practices to turn experiences into memories. And in retrospect, that's a pretty modern attitude to have about travel, or at least this practice of framing your travel as a narrative. That's a pretty modernist conception of dealing with reality. Because according to Byung-Chul, modernity remains a narrative age where you can turn your experience into a cohesive narrative, and there are thresholds and endpoints that you're pursuing with your narrative. At least Paris, for me personally, it's been one of my dreams to visit the city. It's been one of my dreams to write at the same cafes as my literary heroes. So for me, pursuing that threshold, it's been a really good experience. But postmodernity, on the other hand, is an age where people encourage a sort of fractured narrative. There really are no specific endpoints to your actions. One action can simply lead to another set of possibilities, and another set of possibilities can lead to so many different conclusions. In a sense, we're drowning in different outcomes and different possibilities without bringing any of them to a conclusive end. And under this lens, a trip could very easily descend into just a series of quick moments with no memories nor thresholds for you to pursue, neither are there any conclusions for you to ruminate over. And yes, if you do frame your life as kind of like a narrative, and if you do pursue thresholds, sometimes you won't get what you want, and that's the pain that comes with pursuing a threshold. But sometimes if we don't have these thresholds, there will be no conclusions that will really delight us. And this brings me back to what I was talking about with going to the movies. I know the act of heading to the cinema is kind of like a pain in the bum sometimes. You have to drive there, you have to buy the tickets, sometimes you have to line up, sometimes you have to wait for your friends, sometimes you have to watch a bunch of ads before the movie starts, and sometimes you can't get on your phone for an hour or two when you're watching a movie. But all these acts are lining you up, all these are rituals for you to pursue the end threshold of finishing the movie, and when you actually finish the movie, that entire episode is a conclusive act. And that's why when you walk out of the cinema, you feel like you've completed a task without getting lost in a bunch of events in your life. For me, having these little rituals in your life is really about suspending that daily whizzing around so you have a period of time to think. And in other words, you have a period of life to slow your life down. And these deliberate acts of pursuing rituals and thresholds, that's actually a really great way to stabilize time when you feel like life is moving past you way too quickly sometimes. Contrast that to just flipping through Netflix late at home alone on your TV, because there's no resistance, nor is there a ritual for you to getting to the flow of a movie on Netflix. And because there's so many possibilities, you can easily watch a lot of stuff on Netflix and, while feeling like you haven't really watched anything. And similarly in life, you can go through a period of doing a lot of things, and if you don't schedule in these rituals, and if you don't schedule in these periods of time dedicated to pursuing a satisfying conclusion, you can very much go through a few months without feeling like you've done that much. And yes, I'm aware we're kind of living in this age where we don't like rituals that much, where we don't like firm social commitments all that much, and where we don't really value routines anymore or the ritual of going to the cinemas anymore. In the moment, it could seem like a burden, but maybe that's precisely what we need in this fast-paced age for us to stabilize our conception of time. Maybe that's what we need when we feel like we're being rushed all the time. Maybe that's precisely what we need to stop ourselves from always needing to be on the run. I want to conclude today's episode with a very beautiful quote by Byung-Chul from his book, The Scent of Time. Quote, "It is not the absence of ties, but ties themselves that set us free." End quote. Having ties with rituals, having ties with people you love in your life, having ties to something like making a coffee at home first thing in the morning, those are all really great devices for us to slow down time in this age of acceleration, because they allow us the space to remember, to organize, and eventually to cement experiences into beautiful memories. Robin Waldun here, and I hope you have enjoyed today's video essay, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, and goodbye.